Welcome to Lab 20, Managing Local Storage. Lab 20 requires your server A, server running Server 2012, and your client C running Windows 8.1 Enterprise. If you've signed into your client C virtual machine before as the domain administrator, you may not need to start your server A for this exercise. You should likely cache the login username and password so that when you enter it into client C, it'll let you in. If it doesn't authenticate you, then you'll need to start server A at that time so that it can authenticate your account. If you haven't signed in with the ADATEM administrator account before, you will have to start server A. Before we start client C, we'll need to make sure that our client C virtual machine has 2 additional disks. I'd had us do that in the lab setup guide, but we'll need to check our virtual machine to make sure that it has those. So I'm on client C, go to edit virtual machine settings. You can see I have the 2 additional hard drives, disk 1, disk 2. The hard drive that I installed the OS on is actually disk 0. The first hard drive you connect will be disk 0. And then disk 1 will be the second one, and disk 3 or disk 2, sorry, will be the third one you connect. If you need to add these, you can click the add box, select hard disk. SCSI recommended is fine. Create a new virtual disk, say next. The size is going to be 20 gigabytes. Select next. Split into virtual disk files is fine. Now as far as the name, you'll want to name them with disk 1 and disk 2 in the name of the VMDK. You can't leave it this name because this name already exists for your operating system disk image. So you want to change this by putting the disk name into the file name here. This is not asking you which folder to put it in, it's just asking you the name of the VMDK. I've already created mine, but if you need to create one, you'd click Finish. So now I'm going to power on my client C virtual machine. And I'll pause it while it waits for Windows to load. Okay, my client C computer is loaded. We'll actually log in with the ADATEM administrator account. And these virtual machines are actually using the lab config 3 setup from your lab setup guide. So they're joined to the domain, the ADATEM domain. Okay, we're going to right click the start button. And select disk management. I'm just going to expand this a little bit so you can see all the disks. Yours may say unallocated here. I've already formatted mine. If needed, after you open this window, it will tell you if you need to initialize disks 1 and 2. Click OK on the need to initialize them option. And then based on the information in the disk management snap-in, fill out the information in table 20-3 on your lab worksheet. That asks for the disk type, the total disk size, the number and type of partitions, and the amount of unallocated space for disk 0, disk 1, and disk 2. Moving on. In the graphical display of the snap-in in disk 1, which I'm actually going to delete the volume so you can see this. You don't have to delete it unless you've already formatted yours. So we right-click in the unallocated space and choose New Simple Volume. Select Next. In the simple volume size, type 2000. And then click Next. Leave the assigned drive letter selected and choose the drive letter X from the drop-down list. And then click Next. The format partition page appears. Leave the partition format. With the following settings. So it's leave this radio button checkbox, but then we're going to change these settings to FAT32, default, and then the label we're going to call it Part 1, indicating it's the first partition that we're creating on that drive. Leave the Perform a Quick Format checkbox selected and click Next. And click Finish. The new volume appears in the disk management window. Click Cancel. At the Format Drive E prompt if needed. Apparently sometimes it may ask you to confirm something. If you don't already have Drive E formatted. I have it formatted so I didn't see it, but if I had left Drive E unallocated, it would have also asked me, do I want to format Drive E? Take a screenshot of the disk management window that shows the simple volume created by pressing the Control Print screen and pasting into the Lab 20 worksheet. That's the end of exercise 20.1. Leave all the windows open for the next exercise. Exercise 20.2, working with dynamic partitions. Again, on Client C in the disk management snap-in. In the graphical display, right-click the Disk 1 box and choose Convert to Dynamic Disk. and choose the Convert to Dynamic Disk. The Convert to Dynamic Disk dialog box appears. Leave the default Disk 1 checkbox selected and then click OK. The Disks to Convert dialog box appears. Click Convert. You'll see a box warning you that after you convert the disks to dynamic disk, you will not be able to start installed operating systems from any volume other than the current boot volume. So if you had any operating system images on that drive that you converted, they wouldn't load anymore from that drive, meaning the disk 1 drive. Are you sure you want to continue? Click yes, and the program will perform the disk conversion. And question 1, what has happened to the primary partition you created earlier in this lab? One thing I noticed when looking at the lab worksheet, question 1 actually is listed incorrectly as question 2. It looks like they skipped the numbering so that each of the questions got adjusted down a number compared to the way they appear in the lab manual. So question 1 actually is what has happened to the primary partition that you created earlier in this lab. So you want to adjust those numbers accordingly as I go through the video. I'll try to make reference to the numbers they have in the worksheet. So we'll just proceed and see how it goes with the numbering. I'll try to do them the way they appear here in the worksheet, so you don't have to change the number to match what's in the lab manual. So question 2 is what happened to the primary partition you created earlier in the lab. That's the way it appears in the lab worksheet. So what did happen? The answer is here, and it actually converted the simple volume, converted to a simple volume on the dynamic disk. This is the primary partition here we created. And then question 3, after you converted the basic disk to a dynamic disk, how many partitions can be found on the disk, and how do you know? I'll leave that one for you to answer. Moving on, right click. So you want to answer both of those in your lab worksheet, by the way, question 2 and question 3. Moving on, right click on the part 1 volume and take a look at the context menu, which is the right click menu. And then answer question 4, why is the option to extend the volume grayed out? Enter the answer into your lab worksheet. Then moving on, right click the unallocated space on disk 1 and choose new span volume. believe they have the I have to pause here and take a look at this because this band volume is grayed out now that it's a dynamic disk. So let's pause this. So, and what happened was that since I had already formatted disk 2, it was preventing the span volume on the disk 1. So I had to delete my partition here on disk 2. Just selecting it and say delete, so that now when I right click on the unallocated space for disk 1, we'll see new span volume. So we want to select the new span volume. Next. And the wizard appears displaying the welcome page. Click next. In the available box, select disk 2 and then click add. And then disk 2 moves to the selected box. So the reason that it didn't appear originally, when you do a span volume, you need to have more than one drive available that's unallocated. So when I had disk 2 formatted, it wouldn't show the new span volume option on the context menu. And then when I made disk 2 available, then I was able to span a volume because it had more than one volume available to do the spanning. So using the select the amount in the megabyte spin box, configure disk 1 and 2 to contribute all of their available space to the span volume, and click next. So it's actually, the total is listed here, but you can, to use the box here, scroll up so that both of them are as high as they can be, and click next. Select the drive letter Z. And click next. Then we want to leave the radio button selected for format this volume. We want to have the file system as NTFS, the allocation units default, and then we want to call this part 2. And select a perform a quick format checkbox and then click the next button. So make sure to check that in. Select next. Then click finish. And select yes to convert the disk 2 to dynamic disk. And the wizard creates the volume. That's what it's doing now. So it just completed. And then take a screenshot of the disk management window that shows the spanned volume you created by pressing the control print screen and pasting the resulting image into the lab worksheet file. That's the end of exercise 20.2. And the lab challenge I'm not grading, but you can try it if you so choose. That's the end of lab 20.